All right, welcome back to part two. If you made it through that horrendous first video, this one should be a little bit easier. I did say I was going to do some real gameplay for part two, but I couldn't pay anybody to play a basic game, so we'll just go through a few more scenarios, and I'll show you a few of the basic abilities, a couple more rules, and clear up anything I missed on the first video, or messed up, which I'm pretty sure there's more. All right, before we get too far, we'll start with the mistakes I made in the last video and what I said. Sometimes I have a tendency to ramble on, so first of all, the game wasn't started just for learning basic math. It was actually learned, Mr. Garfield traveled the world, and it was one of those cultural things where games are pretty universal. You see people playing games, once you learn it, you don't even need to know the language, as long as you figure out how to play it. It was kind of like that, where that's how he connected with people as he was all over the world as a youngster. Then he's seen D&D, thought it was a pretty cool concept, but made something a little more streamlined. So down the road, invented a game called Five Magics, I believe, or yeah, Five Magics, which evolved into what is Magic with the 5 colors, the 5 elements of where they come from. It was originally going to be called Mana Clash and evolved into Magic. You want to know the whole history? There's videos out there, look them up. Another thing I got wrong right away, once we get through the basics, is in Standard, once you shuffle your decks, draw your 7 cards, the first player does not draw another card right away. I think that was the first thing I said, is you draw for your turn. The second player gets to start the drawing phase. Then everybody draws a card, their turn after that. Most of the time, the words in italics, let's see. Remember I said there's, whoa, that one's really bright. But you'll see the bold, you have to worry about the bold. Then after that, that is just part of a storyline. I don't know if you can see that up there. There are certain instances, though, where if there's bold writing and then usually in parentheses, it'll have some italics. That part you actually should read, because that is the part of the reading the cards thing that I told you about. So usually it'll show like the ability. It's very hard to see. It says flying up in the top corner there. And then in italics, right next to that, that tells you this creature cannot be blocked except by creatures with flying or reach. So every once in a while, the italics you have to read, but most of the time, the italics, there's usually a line now, and the italic story is on the bottom. Cool to read, but you don't have to read that part. When it comes time to attack and block, where you're tapping your creatures to attack, you do not pick who or what creatures you're attacking. I know that was a common thing that a lot of people that I've taught how to play right out of the gate, they try attacking individual creatures. When you go to your attack phase, when you attack with your creatures, you are only attacking the other player. You cannot pick out what you're attacking. Once again, there are cards that will allow you to pick and choose, but just in general, You're only attacking the person, not their creatures. And I said with the card types, the last one I did was instant, and I said like when they're doing their upkeep and stuff, you can't use instants on upkeep either. So there's a few things I jumped the gun on a little too fast, but we'll get back around and back on track here. So to start this video out real quick, we'll do a quick refresh with how it goes. So each player has 20 life. The whole point is to try to get that away from them. Each turn, you draw, on your first turn you draw 7 cards, and then every turn after that you get to draw a card. If you're first, you do not get to draw a card right away. You only get to hold the 7. So you start out with your basic land cards. Like I said, there's 5 different colors, so your decks can be whatever color you want to make them. So the very first thing you want to do is start getting stuff out so you can pay for your cards. So every turn you can drop 1 land card. You are allowed to use that land card right away if you have something that you were able to play. So you want to get your land cards out first, and then you want to pay for your spells. So the first spell we went into was creatures. Creatures are your way to attack and defend yourself from attacking your opponents. So you drop your creatures in. The second you drop that creature, you cannot use it that first turn you put it out. It has summoning sickness. When it's the opponent's turn, if they have something they can attack you with, you are allowed to block with it, though. Now when it goes back to your turn, now you can attack, you can send that thing flying. I shouldn't have said flying, but you can send it wherever you want. Also on your turn, you are allowed to play the sorcery cards. Once you use a sorcery card, whatever it says happens, then that card gets put into your graveyard. You cannot use sorcery cards on other people's turns. And I also said there were 2 main types of enchantments on the last video. I apologize, there's 3. I said 2 and then showed an example of 3. So you have your enchantments, which they used to be called, if it just says enchantment or enchantment aura or anything like that, they used to be called global enchantments. They're not anymore, but it's enchantment. It stays out there all the time unless somebody can destroy it. Then you have the enchant creatures, which go underneath your creature, but whatever that card says, that's what happens. There's some good ones for you, some bad ones for your opponents. Then we had enchant lands, which I don't physically have one right here, but you can enchant lands. Sometimes those are good, sometimes those are bad. Enchantments always stay out until something happens. Then you have your instant cards, and your instant cards are what they say. They happen that instant. There are ways to protect yourself, but instants can be played on anybody's turn at certain phases. The instant is like a sorcery, though. It goes out, it does what it does, then it goes in your graveyard. Now, since we got this far with it, if you're not this far with it, go back to video 1, check it out. Like, subscribe, do that whole bit. So if you use an enchantment on a creature, and something happens where that creature dies, so does the enchantment. The whole thing will go down. All into your graveyard. So now what I didn't show you last time is, depending on what you're doing, who you're playing with, how your table's laid out. We played in tight spots before where everybody's almost shoulder to shoulder. So sometimes your graveyard's not where it should be. Sometimes your deck doesn't lay out. But you can see here, normally what you'll do is you'll put your deck here. You'll draw your cards. You'll put your land cards right down towards the bottom. When you're paying for stuff, your creatures usually go kind of in the middle or up towards the top. So that way if you have an enchantment you want to put out, the enchantment can sit up on the top somewhere. This deck I'm using here has a lot of enchantments. And then if stuff gets destroyed, usually put it in your graveyard down below. If you draw planeswalkers, which I maybe forgot about them guys, but planeswalkers, some people put them right on the board, some people put them up like above your deck, because since they are a little bit different than a normal card, I always put them off to the side so I remember them. Every once in a while when you're playing this game, you will have a board that is just packed full of stuff. You have stuff all over the place, and you're not going to be able to get it in camera up top, but normally the boards, the camera right now is only seeing like this much of my board. My board's actually this big, or my mat, and as you can see, my lovely wife made me the Hellish Hobbies trademark play mat, not found anywhere else in the world. But so you want your graveyard kind of right below your library. Put your creatures kind of in the middle, then your enchantments can go up on top. And then if you start getting too much stuff, anytime I have copies of something, once they come out, usually I'll stack them. I don't ever stack my enchantments, but just for show and tell purposes here. See, like that, it's another enchantment that I can put right on top. So since I couldn't pay anybody to come and play with me, I want to go through a few more abilities, and then my original intent here was to get basic creatures, basic spells out to show you how it all goes. But we're actually going to switch this episode up a little bit to do the refresher. I'll go back and forth with a few things, show you how stuff comes out, how it plays. And there's a few abilities I think you should learn right away. Now already, if you might be thinking to yourself, this game already is too much. I actually know a few people that started watching video 1 that said, that already seems too hard. It's the quick grasping of it is easy. Like I said, it's all card reading. So one of the main abilities right away would be flying. Because otherwise there's all the normal creatures that you see. I could actually bust out a few that we had earlier, but we're not going to. Okay, so now when we played the creature cards, like say, I gotta find a plains here. Plains and a 1, so that's an island, I know. Settle down, folks. Okay, so normally we had 2 turns, we'll say. We put down a plains and an island. Okay, and we had this guy, he's a 2/2. He cost a plains and then 1 of any color. So that's what I was talking about before. I wish that would zoom right there. It will not. Almost did. So there's a plain symbol and a 1. So we'll pay the plains and we'll pay the 1. And we'll put this guy out. He has 2 power, which is your first number. That's how much you can attack with. And 2 toughness. That's your defense. That's how much you can take. So normally, this is just a little guy hanging out on the ground. It doesn't say anything special on here. It does say, whenever I gain life, I can put a 1/1 on him. So whenever I gain life, I can keep building this guy up a ton. And the wording on the cards, whenever you gain life, put a 1/1. It doesn't say whenever you gain a life. So if I have a card that comes out and says you gain 50 life, he doesn't get 50. he only gets a 1/1 counter because I gained life. I didn't gain a life. But now if I had 2 cards that said I gained whatever, however many life. So if I had one that said I gained 50, he would get a 1/1 counter, and he'd get a little bit bigger. And then if I had another card that I put out right after that that said I gained 1 life, he would get one more 1/1 counter, because that is 2 different ways I gained life. That's the complexity of the game. That's about it right there. Reading the words. I get called out by one of our group players all the time. I've been playing 20 years longer than him, and I get called out because I will make them weird little mistakes once in a while. Okay, so now we'll just pretend this is the other guy's card. Now you'll see a lot of cards that say flying. And I am holding my hand over another one, but this has flying. There are a ton of cards that are flying. Flying are, I mean, it's almost what it sounds like. So if this guy with flying, it's only a little 1/1. And I already have a 2/2. So normally when we did the battle thing, where they both come together, if one attacked and one was blocking, normally if we did that, this 2/2 would destroy it. With flying, they are exactly what they say. They are flying. So if this thing attacks, it will actually fly right over the ground creatures, right to the person. A ground creature cannot block a flying creature at all. But a flying creature can swoop down to block a ground creature, just like a bird. Birds can land, birds can take off. So we're not quite on the deck building yet, but once we get to the deck building thing, I always recommend put a little bit of flying, or some ground creatures do say they can block flying. It's an ability called reach. They can reach up and block it. Most reach creatures still today, on the card it'll say reach in bold, and in parentheses it'll say can block creatures with flying. So, one other thing I missed last time with this attack and block thing. Now, if for some reason, say the person was down to just a few life left, that's about the only time they'd burn up blocking this little 2/2. But let's just say I attacked with this one. So we'll go side to side here. I attack with this, a 2/2. This guy right here has this 1/1, flying. Doesn't matter at this point if it's flying or not for this demonstration. But so this guy's going to block the 2/2. Okay, so obviously the 2 is bigger than 1, and he's only giving 1 back to his 2, so the bird that's blocking would die. Now, this guy, because he's a 2/2, at this exact moment in the game, this bird hit him with 1 point of damage and blocked 1 point of damage. So this one essentially would lose 1 on its defense. So it's only got 1 for defense right now. As soon as the turn is over, though, the second that turn is over, this is right back to a 2/2. As soon as you say, my turn's over, it's your turn, as long as nothing else happens in that quick few seconds there, as soon as the other player untaps their stuff and draws their card, he is back to a 2/2 again. So in the gameplay, he'll be tapped, so he can't block, but you don't lose that power and toughness. And that was another big question that actually popped up from video 1, is I didn't explain that well enough. Once the turn's over, everything kind of refreshes again. And once it's your turn, you're allowed to untap. You can use your mana every single turn unless somebody destroys it, which is possible. So it seems like since, well, right now we're on, if we went back to the core set, we're in Magic 21, the year that we are in right now. Ever since probably, I don't want to go too far, but like Magic 15, around that time. So 6-7 years ago or so, flying creatures became some of the most powerful dominant creatures because they fly. You'll see a lot of small flying guys, but flying come in every shape and size. And now the way Magic's going, most cards don't just have one ability anymore. Now it's a whole chain of events or something that helps out a whole deck of cards. So flying creatures can fly right over the ground creatures. Ground creatures cannot block them. Flying creatures can block flying or ground creatures. So when playing, kind of try to make sure you always keep a little balance with a couple flying things just in case. So flying is the reason why I'm not doing a separate video on this. I'm actually putting this as part of the part 2 video for learning. Flying's kind of a must-have. So it's not even like I said in the first video, it's not even like a special ability anymore. It's just common. Get a couple flyers out there. Okay, and the few of the abilities I'm going to do are mainly if you go out and buy a starter deck or something today. You're going to see a lot of these abilities in these cards. So I don't want to make it too special, but because most cards will tell you exactly what they do. Okay, so I'll show you a couple of these. All right, next one's gonna be called Trample. Trample is another cool ability that I didn't use a lot of trample stuff until probably midway through my career in Magic, but now a lot of the bigger, typically ground, but a lot of the bigger creatures with trample is exciting. So what trample does, here I'm going to show you a big 6/6, and we're not worried about the rest of the ability, we're just worried about the top one that says trample. So it's a 6/6 with trample. And then I have just right here, I got a 4/4 with trample. So you'll see a lot of trample cards. A lot of the bigger green creatures typically are your trample guys. Okay, what the ability trample does is, this was the one where I had said you could have, I don't even have a 10/10 in my hand, but you could have a huge creature, or we can go back to the bird, a bigger creature. So I got a 2/2 attacking, and this guy's going to defend with a 1/1. Normally what happens is that 2/2 kills the 1/1. That's it. Done. Now, this same guy that had the 1/1, his next turn, he puts out a 6/6 trample. When it gets back to his turn, when he can attack, so now let's pretend that he's attacking with a 6/6 trample. Trample is the ability that allows all that extra damage to go right through to the player. So 6/6. If you're blocking it with a 2/2, the 2/2 would die, and it would deal 4 more points of damage directly to the player. So trample is the ability to allow all excess damage to keep going through until it hits the player. So let's get back to video 1. I said there are cards that will allow you to do everything in this game. To me, that's why it's so fun. It's just a little bit of strategy, a lot of luck actually too, but strategy, a lot of just back and forth stuff, because nobody out there has a deck that will block every ability that I could show you. It's impossible unless they're cheating, or they have their whole card collection is just one big stack of cards and they come to try to play with it. In which you can have as many cards in a deck as you want. as long as you can cut that and shuffle it together without spilling cards. So usually that's around, I think it was like 370 or something is one of the bigger ones. But anyway, keep it around 60 or so. That way you always know what cards you have, unless you're playing a different game types. But for standard, keep it 60 to 70. It's usually the best. But okay, so tramples. Trample will go right through all the excess damage. So keep this out there. We'll keep the flying out there. Some of the older abilities too, like they used to be older abilities, I thought, are coming back around now as well. The ability called Haste. So what Haste is, oh, that has like 15 abilities, but you can't really see that. But Haste, you'll see a couple of, I've noticed a lot on the smaller cards lately. There's quite a few like goblin creature type cards. Haste. That is the card that negates summoning sickness. If you have a creature with haste, you can play that card and attack with it or use its abilities right away. Right on the spot. So haste, I don't use a lot of haste because for me haste would pretty much only be that good. But this one's pretty big. This is a 4/4 with another ability on it, so that's pretty cool. But a lot of the haste creatures that can come out, fire away right away, they're usually smaller. So if you can get them early in the game, that's awesome. So you get them out there and you attack right away, deal that damage, and then from there on out, most of the time they're a blocker if the other person gets cards out. But haste is pretty good for that quick damage. Or if you can get it, like this one's a 4/4, so if somebody attacks you and you didn't have them out there right away, well, the next turn you can get them out there right away and swing back at them. Little revenge thing. I like that. So flying, trample, and haste are some of the easier ones, but so there's, yeah. But yeah, so like the ability there, it tells you what the ability is, and then in parentheses, it actually tells you what that ability does. That one's called cycling, but we're not worried about that yet. So I honestly think that's three of the big ones. Trample, flying for sure, haste is coming back again, and then one of my favorite abilities, and I got 16 decks here, and now I gotta go through everything. One of my favorite abilities is the ability called Vigilance. I used to have a lot of old cards. I still do have a lot of old cards, but before they actually gave these abilities, the older cards used to just spell right out what it was. Instead of telling you trample, for instance, the old cards would say any excess damage dealt by this creature to another creature will go to that creature's owner or whatever. Haste, instead of saying haste, it would say this creature can attack and use all abilities the second it's summoned, pretty much, and so on and so forth. Vigilance. Attacking with this creature does not cause this creature to tap. So Vigilance is an ability that I am starting to actually base some decks around, because it doesn't make your creature tap. So what's so cool about that? Well, it's the attack and block phases. So let's just say this is a 5/5 vigilance or whatever. This is a vigilant creature. It's bigger than these, for say. So if I attack this guy and say he blocked with a small one, and then his next turn he puts an enchantment or something big onto this one to make it huge, or something that could take my life away. When he would go attack, normally your creature would be tapped, so you couldn't block or do anything with it. Where Vigilance, you just have to say, I'm attacking with this. So if they blocked with this and this one died, and then they attacked the next turn, I have a blocker available to save me. So Vigilance is becoming more and more common, or has become more and more common now. Great ability because you always have your blockers backed up. So, I just put that back, that was weird. So, we'll probably hold on those 4 abilities right now. Just because most of the other abilities now will say it on the card somewhere usually. I will do, well, I guess I'll do 1 or 2 more actually, because I noticed they're not showing up on cards anymore. Usually the abilities will be on there. So the next one, we'll keep the bird out for a minute. See this, I like this one because it has 2 abilities on it. So this is the one that we've been bringing out, that I've been doing the show and tell, but now you can read Flying and Lifelink. So I don't know if you can see it up top, but Flying and Lifelink. Lifelink is a great ability. Most people that start playing with Lifelink start building decks around Lifelink, because what this does is anytime this deals damage to anything, you gain that much life. So this is a 1/1. Every time it attacks anything it touches, a creature or a player, you gain 1 life. And that's regardless if it dies or not. So if I had the big 5/5 flyer right here, take this one. So I have a 5/5 and they have a 1/1. If they attack me, I have a 5/5 flying, which is way bigger than theirs, and it will kill it. So I'm going to block. This will die, but this person will still gain the 1 life. So what you want to do with stuff like that, I mean with any creatures, is you want to find your instants and your sorcery spells and all that stuff, your enchant creatures, and you take these little guys and you build them up. I have actually seen, just for instance, this card, I have had the 1/1 counters on this, where this was a 7/7, I think, before the game ended. Which isn't huge by any means, and I'm not saying that that's amazing or anything, but it's 7 points of damage anytime it touches somebody, and I gain 7 life. To me, that's pretty impressive. That's the kind of cards, I dig that. So, that's 2 in 1. That's a flyer, and it's got lifelink. So if you're playing a group of people, you know, once you start playing people too, you kind of get used to their cards if you play with them enough. And when you get people that want to build these big, massive creature decks, usually they're probably 75 to 80% all on the ground. So if you can come out with a bunch of these little guys and get them built up, their deck will look powerful, but you'll pick away slow, but you'll actually be gaining the life back. And I like to do that. I like to slow, methodical games usually. So last but not least, pull out from my new stuff. Well, actually, I might have something here. Most of this one was a pre-made deck. So the next one we're going to talk about, since we did Lifelink, we will do Death Touch. And I am not sponsored by anybody, so you'll see that most of my cards, though, are sleeved. Regardless of where you get them, any cheap sleeves will do. I recommend once you start playing this game, try to invest in some sleeves. I have spilt on new cards. The new cards do not like liquids at all. I have old cards that have been beat up, drugged behind cars, spilt on, and anything else. And it seems like they last. Like the newer cards, they will swell up and distort and get all crazy. So, pull out a couple of Death Touch creatures here. Then I might have to... Oh, that's a perfect one to show too. So Death Touch is cool because it doesn't matter how big the creature is with Death Touch compared to how big the creature is without it. And that's attacking and blocking. Death Touch creatures will do this. So, obviously this one, 1/1 lifelink, wouldn't matter because it'd be a 1/1 Death Touch, but we'll go over to a bigger creature. So we'll go to a 4/4, pretend he doesn't have any abilities, against a 1/1 with Death Touch. If the 4/4 attacks and the Death Touch blocks, they're both dead because the 4/4 got hit with a Death Touch creature. Vice versa, if the 1/1 attacks and you block with your 4/4, both creatures die because of the Death Touch. And see, they brought this back. They hadn't said it for a while, but now the newer cards, well, this is a 15, never mind, but any amount of damage this deals to a creature is enough to destroy it. Period. I like Death Touch. I just built a whole Death Touch poison counter deck. It's ridiculous. And where the abilities stack, like I was saying before, I have a 2/3 that has flying, Death Touch, and haste. So that means that this thing can come out and it can attack directly that turn because of haste. It can fly over anything else because it has flying, but if a creature with flying blocks it midair, depending on the power of the other creature compared to this, that creature's dead for sure. So Death Touch is another powerful one. So lifelink, you gain the life off of any damage that's dealt. Actually, it's probably right back to the beginning here. Flying can fly over, can only be blocked with flying. Trample, all the excess damage goes through to whatever else, the player or whatever. Haste can attack on that turn. Lifelink gains life. Death Touch kills anything it touches except for the player. A 1/1 Death Touch will only still take 1 life away from a player. A 5/5 Death Touch will take 5 points away from the player, so on and so forth. So, for the ending of video 2, I do have to show the blocking schemes a little bit better. So I'm going to do some adjustments and I'll be right back. Alright. Now you'll understand why a lot of people, when they do these, they do them in several different part videos with the attacking phases, the blocking, all of that stuff. Because there can be a lot to it, but we're going to pack her all into one here. We need to get people playing, because obviously I'm by myself here. And we used to do some weekly games, but now there's a fun center in town. IMRC, the Iron Mountain Rec Center, which now they're going to start doing Magic on Fridays. Because our group used to play every weekend, but real life happens, so that's all fine and dandy. We'll get back to it again, but now we haven't played games in a while, and like I said, I couldn't get anybody to do this with me to show you the back and forth part. But the last piece I want to show you real quick before we end this now will be the blocking phases, and most of the videos from here on out should be just helpful hints, get you going. Like I said, we're going to do a lot of live gameplay once everything gets going again. So one thing that I would like to show real quick would be the attacking and blocking phases of this, because there can be a few different scenarios that can happen. Mainly when a big creature is attacking, it can only, I don't want to mess this up, big creature attacks, creatures can be blocked by more than one creature. Blocking was a big one that the group that I play with, there was a lot of questions in it, because I was blocking but I didn't tell them why I was doing things a certain way or whatever, or when they would block with multiple creatures. So what happens is, we'll say a big creature attacks you. I have a 4/4 attacking me. Don't forget, you attack the person, not their creatures. So I have a 4/4 attacking me. We'll just pretend that I am down to, we'll say, 2 life. Normally, normally you don't want to block, with all your creatures, because then that leaves you, creatureless, and you're vulnerable, wide open. But in certain cases, you have to. So what'll happen is the 4/4's attacking me. I am going to block with a 2/2 and a 1/1. Now, there's a certain part of unrealism here where we already know that the 4/4 can take out 3 power and 3 toughness coming at him. But the thing to know here is, if I'm blocking with this, it's the attacking player who gets to choose the order in which they actually get blocked. Meaning, say I somehow could defeat him, which I'll show you that scenario in a second, but I could go, I want to do the bird first, I want to do the 2/2 guy second. That's not up to me. It's up to him. So he can block these in whatever order he wants. Which both of these would die and be put into the graveyard. But now, let's say I have 3 creatures. Now I have a 1/4, so it can only deal 1, but it can take up to 4, a 2/2, and a 1/1. I tell a lot of people it's never a good idea to just count your damage points up unless you're not going to block or anything like that. Then go ahead and count their powers and all that. So now this scenario is a 4/4 is coming at me. I have the 1/1, the 2/2, and the 1/4. Now, if this guy blocks in the wrong order, it could leave my bigger creature alive. So let's just say this guy's going to pick the blocking. Like if I were picking my own blocking, I'd put the 1/4 first, because he would deal all 4 points of his damage directly to my 4 for my toughness, which would kill this guy, and these guys would actually stay alive because he doesn't have any more to give away. So what this guy's probably going to do is block this one first, or attack this one first, and then this one last, which will still keep one of my creatures alive, and because we dealt 4, his big guy would die. But it's up to the attacking player. So we'll turn this around. Now if I had the 4/4 and I'm attacking, he blocks with all 3. I also would take his 2/2 first, his 1/1 bird, and then the 1/4. I'd leave the 1 alive, because if this, it's 1/4. So if that one's alive, he's only going to be picking at me with 1 point of damage the whole time. So that's a big step. I mentioned that in the last video as well, that the blocking, how to block properly. Now, if we had, say, a 1/4, or something that added up to that, we'll just pretend. Say we had, or a 4/1. If we blocked with that, 4/1 would kill the 4/4. But everything has to resolve first. So this one actually has the ability to trample. He's dealing 4, he's dealing 4, and we only had 1. Even though we'd kill this in combat, the extra damage would still swing through at us. So let's go slow, read the cards, and now from here on out, we're going to be doing gameplay. We'll do some deck building next. I was going to conclude this video with one more thing, but I am having a brain fart. So there's a few abilities which you'll see a lot. You'll see the flying, you'll see a lot, trample, the haste will come up a little bit, lifelink's big, and death touch is getting bigger again too. So we'll go through the next ones. We'll do some shorter videos on abilities, and say once everything turns out right, we'll do some full-on games. And if we're playing regular games, I will stop and explain certain things, what's happening. Also, I'd like to do a turn game on what the turns of the game are one more time. Your upkeep, your main phase, your combat phase, your second main phase, and your end step. 5 major things. They're all pretty easy, but it just, every time those phases go on, that's when you're allowed to play like the instance on other people's turns. There's always got to be something has to happen in the phases of the game in order for you to be able to play those. So that's a starting point. If you happen to know me personally and you watch this video, I am actually going to be giving away probably a couple decks of cards. There'll be some old cards, some new cards. There'll be Jason's Choice packs, the ones that I put together, or modified from some bot packs. So I'll be giving away some decks coming up, and I'll explain how to do that later. Until then, let's get playing.